The rich colors and inspiring music of K-animation spark the imagination and capture the eyes and ears of children around the world. Non-violent Korean animation that focuses on good influence. Through adventure and friendship, learn valuable lessons and realize the importance of friends. Covering topics such as family, friends, and courage, they help children learn how to interact with the world. Embark on imaginative adventures with new friends and dream together. K-Animation's special stories will warm your heart.
It's December 19th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with another rate cut by the U.S. Federal Reserve. America's central bank slashed interest rates for a third time on Wednesday, but signaled a slower pace for cuts in 2025. The widely expected cut made all three major indexes see their biggest daily decline in months. The state anti-corruption investigation team, the CIO, will now take control of the martial law order-related investigation into President Yoon Suk-yeol, with the prosecution handing over the lead. But the CIO still needs to send the case back to the prosecution after completing its investigations. Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is holding a special cabinet meeting this morning, where he is expected for the first time to exercise his executive right to request a reconsideration by vetoing 6 contentious bills proposed by the main opposition party. The U.S. Federal Reserve went ahead with another rate cut, raising questions about its balancing act between controlling inflation and supporting economic growth. Our Moon Hae-ryun starts us off.
The Fed has cut rates once again, despite slower than expected progress made on inflation in the United States. On Wednesday local time, following the last Federal Open Market Committee meeting of the year, Fed policymakers slashed the benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points, bringing it down to the 4.25 to 4.5% range. The latest action brings the total cut made since September to 1 full percentage point and comes despite inflation continuing to remain stubbornly above the Fed's 2% target. The U.S. Personal Consumption Price Expenditures Index, the Fed's gauge of inflation, rose to 2.8% in October, while the Consumer Price Index jumped 2.7% in November.
We know that reducing policy restraint too fast or too much could hinder progress on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too slowly or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment.
Fed officials also made some adjustments to their forecasts for next year, projecting a slower pace of rate cuts compared to its September forecast, as well as persisting inflation. By the end of 2025, they see 2 rate deductions of 25 basis points each, which is half a percentage point less than what they anticipated 3 months ago. Inflation forecasts also jumped from 2.1% to 2.5%. These are the first projections since Donald Trump was elected the next president of the United States, and Powell remarked that it is premature to make any conclusions on how possible tariffs could affect consumer inflation. Following the Fed's decision, Wall Street tumbled with the Dow Jones falling for the 10th day straight to mark its longest downward slope since 1974. The tech-heavy Nasdaq and benchmark S&P 500 also tallied their largest drops in months. This latest decision from the Fed brings the interest rate gap between South Korea and the US back down to 1.5 percentage points, after it widened to 1.75 percentage points in September. Finance authorities, including the country's finance minister and the Bank of Korea's governor, held a meeting on Thursday morning to discuss these developments and the domestic economic situation. The finance ministry and central bank said they would continue to operate an around-the-clock system to monitor the foreign exchange market and pledge to do their best to stabilize financial markets. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Multiple investigation teams have been looking into the December 3rd emergency martial law. But now, the high-ranking officials' crime investigation agency will take charge of the case. Our Kim Jung-sil tells us more.
The investigation into the December 3rd martial law has taken a new turn. On Wednesday, the prosecution transferred the case to the Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials, or the CIO. The move follows concerns over overlapping investigations with the prosecution, police, and the CIO all handling the same case. Officials stated that the transfer was meant to prevent further complications and address concerns about the legitimacy of the charges. However, after the decision was made, there was reportedly resistance within the prosecution's special investigation team as they claimed to have made significant progress and were frustrated by the sudden change. The transfer case includes allegations of treason against President Yoon Suk-yeol and former Safety Minister Lee Sang-min. While the CIO will now lead the investigation, it does not have the power to charge a sitting president. If evidence is found, the case will be referred back to the prosecution for formal charges. Meanwhile, the investigation continues to focus on the military's role during the martial law period. Around 1,500 soldiers were deployed with rifles, sniper rifles, tasers, and drone jamming devices, along with 10,000 rounds of live ammunition. 100 military vehicles and 12 helicopters were also involved in the operation. Earlier this week on Tuesday, police made a second attempt to raid the presidential office for crucial communication records, but once again, their efforts were blocked by security. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is likely to veto 6 contentious bills at a cabinet meeting on Thursday. He would be exercising his executive right to request a reconsideration for the first time as he takes charge of the nation's affairs during President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment proceedings. According to Han's office, the interim leader is holding an extraordinary cabinet meeting from 10 a.m. at the Seoul government complex. He is reportedly leaning towards vetoing the bills that the opposition Democratic Party railroaded through at the National Assembly last month. These include laws on parliamentary authority, subsidies, and price stabilization measures for grain, agriculture, and fishery products. Now, after the cabinet meeting, Han will chair a policy coordination meeting, then receive a briefing on national security issues. And Korea's top economic and diplomatic chief stepped up to provide reassurances that things are under control on the economic and security fronts, taming concerns over the potential ripple effects of the country's political chaos. Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
South Korea's constitutional system and emergency response mechanisms are functioning well, despite heightened uncertainties stemming from recent domestic and international factors. This, according to Deputy Prime Minister Choi Sang-mok, who also serves as Minister of Economy and Finance. The Finance and Foreign Ministries jointly held a press conference with foreign correspondents in Seoul on Wednesday to address concerns the international community might have over South Korea's economic and diplomatic situation. The government responded promptly to the volatile financial and foreign exchange situation following the martial law decree imposition and Yoon's impeachment, Choi said, stabilizing the markets. Political uncertainty, too, is resolving, according to Choi, with the budget and key tax bills being passed in the National Assembly on December 10th. through close cooperation between the government and both the ruling and opposition parties. While stressing how three major global credit rating agencies assess that Seoul's political situation would only have a limited impact on its credit rating, Che vowed to stay vigilant.
We will remain vigilant and bring together all available public and private sector resources to manage the economy as stably as possible, given the possibility of market fluctuations and the potential dampening of economic sentiment.
The Finance Ministry's top priority will be to maintain external trust and confidence in the South Korean economy. For this, Che pledged to operate a 24-hour monitoring system for the financial and foreign exchange markets and enhance incentives for foreign investment. The ministry will develop plans to strengthen fundamental industrial competitiveness, and for the people's livelihoods, it plans to front-load budget spending into the first half of next year to bolster the economy. The economic policy direction for 2025 will also soon be announced. Meanwhile, though there could be some questions over the sustainability of Seoul's foreign policy, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol emphasized he would fully maintain the current policy under the acting presidency.
We will maintain a steadfast ROK-US alliance and friendly cooperation with Japan and actively work to ensure the momentum for trilateral cooperation among Korea, the US, and Japan is sustained.
While adding South Korea will brace for a resumption of a US-North Korea dialogue under the Donald Trump administration, the minister added it will consult closely with China to further improve bilateral ties. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The U.S. Senate on Wednesday passed the National Defense Authorization Act for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. The bill also includes provisions to maintain the current level of U.S. troops stationed here in South Korea ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office next month. Lee Seung-ja has more.
The U.S. Senate on Wednesday passed the National Defense Authorization Act for the 2025 fiscal year, with 85 votes in favor and 14 against. The bill, worth $895.2 billion, also includes provisions to maintain the current level of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. According to the NDAA, the budget allows for the maintaining of approximately 28,500 U.S. Forces Korea troops, strengthening the mutual defense industrial base, and reaffirming extended deterrence commitment, utilizing all U.S. defense capabilities. The Pentagon was also ordered to report on plans to strengthen the U.S. extended deterrence commitment to South Korea and ways to advance defense cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The passage of the budget bill also comes almost a month before President-elect Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office. Trump has previously threatened to pull U.S. troops out of South Korea and has demanded that Seoul increases its contribution to the cost of stationing USFK troops. Meanwhile, top Democrats and Republicans at the U.S. Congress reached an agreement on Wednesday on a continuing resolution preventing a possible government shutdown just before the start of the new U.S. administration. The bill allows for the federal agencies to be funded through March 14th. The stopgap measure would keep the roughly $6.2 trillion federal budget running at its current level and also includes a $100.4 billion package in new emergency funding to help states like North Carolina and Florida recover from recent natural disasters. While the vote is likely to pass, should lawmakers fail to act in time, the government would enter a partial shutdown beginning on Saturday. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
With just a month left until he returns to the Oval Office, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on Tuesday held his first news conference since his election victory 6 weeks ago. Let's discuss more with Voice of America correspondent Chris Keskeho. Welcome back, Chris.
Good to be with you.
So, Chris, during his news conference on Tuesday, did he hint at the direction that he intends to pursue on the diplomatic front once he takes office next month?
Yeah, that news conference on Tuesday, President-elect Trump said he's spoken with representatives of more than 100 countries. Now, experts predict that while he might show interest in resuming dialogue with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, it's unlikely to be an early priority. Voice of America spoke with Gary Seymour, who's the former White House coordinator for weapons of mass destruction, and he said that Trump might be willing to resume summit diplomacy with Kim Jong-un, but such discussions are unlikely to be high on the administration's agenda, at least in the first few days of the administration. And Seymour cites the war in Ukraine, various conflicts in the Middle East, and even in Asia, U.S.-China relations as being more pressing issues for the new administration to deal with. Meanwhile, Daniel Snyder, who's a lecturer in East Asian Studies at Stanford University in California, highlighted challenges for South Korea if U.S.-North Korea talks do resume. He said Trump might bypass South Korea entirely, as he did during his first term.
So handling Korean Peninsula issues may not be his priority, but has there been any reaction from Trump regarding the impeachment of the South Korean president and the whole political turmoil resulting from the martial law order?
So far, no reaction from the incoming President-elect Trump or any of his key cabinet appointees as of now.
Well, but what about the current Biden administration? How is it viewing the political drama here in the country?
Well, the White House said that U.S. President Biden had spoken with acting President Han Duck-soo, reaffirming the ironclad commitment of the United States to the people of the ROK, using the abbreviation for South Korea's formal name, the Republic of Korea. Biden also expressed confidence that the alliance between the two countries would remain the linchpin for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Meanwhile, State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that despite the change of leadership in the U.S. and Japan and the passage of impeachment articles against South Korean President Yoon, one thing that remains unchanged is the fundamental interests of all three countries, and it is in the fundamental interests of all three countries to continue the trilateral relationship between the United States, South Korea, and Japan.
Yeah, it is a relief to hear that the security alliance between South Korea, the U.S., and also the trilateral security alliance between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo is solid for now. Now, Chris, before I let you go, I'd like to cover the heated debate over the possibility of TikTok being banned over in the U.S., with the Supreme Court now agreeing to hear arguments next month. What's at stake?
The Supreme Court justices will hear arguments on January 10th. At issue is whether the federal law that was passed in April that calls for the sale of TikTok, or it could face a ban if its Chinese parent company does not sell it, whether that is unconstitutional and violates the First Amendment protections involving free speech. Now, this law set a January 19th deadline for TikTok to be sold or else face a ban in the U.S. The popular social media platform has more than 170 million users in the U.S. Now, it's unclear how quickly a Supreme Court decision might come, but the High Court still could act after the arguments to keep the law from taking effect pending a final ruling if at least five of the 9 justices think that the law is unconstitutional and a violation of First Amendment protections of free speech.
Well, then how is the president-elect trying to handle the issue? I mean, it looks like he does have a warm spot for TikTok since he also met with the TikTok CEO this week, right?
Right. Trump has had a change of heart on TikTok over the past several years, especially since his first administration, his first term in office, when he was one of the people calling to ban TikTok. But now he's pledging, as he did during his campaign, to save TikTok. And like you said, he met with TikTok CEO Shou Zi-Chew at Mar-a-Lago on Monday, and he says his administration would take a look at the situation. Now, TikTok's parent company ByteDance says that a shutdown lasting just a month in the U.S. could cause TikTok to lose about 1/3 of its daily users in this country and, of course, significant advertising revenue.
We'll have to get back to you next month. Chris, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Good to be with you again.
We are now a week away from the Christmas day. For those of you here in Seoul looking to enjoy the joyous holiday vibe, here are a few spots to check out. Here's our An Sung-jin.
The year-end festivities have returned. It's the season where friends and families gather together to celebrate and get the feel of Christmas. Ornaments glisten and stars shine on Christmas trees, creating the perfect photo spot.
Department stores have geared up for Christmas this year to attract visitors, and this Christmas market offers various activities, including a carousel ride.
From glue vine to a giant Christmas tree, this Christmas market has opened in the center of Seoul. With more than 40 Christmas-themed shops, it lures in visitors with its vivid colors.
It's been so busy that I didn't even know it was Christmas, but I'm glad I get to spend time with my kid out here like this.
I love to be able to find typical desserts and stuff from Europe, let's say, and it's amazing because you have the spirit of Christmas here, even in Korea.
In another part of the city, this digital media facade shows Christmas scenes through illustrations and lights beaming from the screen.
The decorations here are so fancy. It's nice to be here.
Though we're now retired designers, we've worked in this area for a long time, so it's nice to see all the decorations out here.
Retailers are rushing to showcase their annual year-end decorations, not only for marketing their brand image, but also to help boost declining in-person purchases. Stores this year have focused on not only displays, but more interactive spaces to keep customers for a longer time. A professor says these eye-grabbing attractions could boost domestic consumption.
People tend to open their wallet when they're a bit more excited, and these decorations act as a catalyst for that. Not only for those actually passing by with social media, it induces consumption, leading to a ripple effect of drawing in more people.
These Christmas decorations not only bring a festive atmosphere, but also a chance to boost the local economy. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Kim Xiang. Good morning, Xiang.
Good morning, Dami.
So I hear you have an update on the assassination of a top Russian general. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. Following the assassination in Moscow of Russia's head of the Radiation, Chemical and Biological Protection Forces, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, Russian authorities say they have detained a suspect. Now, Russia's investigative committee said on Wednesday that it has detained a 29-year-old man from Uzbekistan who has admitted to being recruited by Ukrainian special services and carrying out the assassination. The suspect, who was identified by Russian news agency TASS as Akhmat Kurvanov, said he was offered $100,000 and resettlement in a European country in exchange for killing Lieutenant General Kirillov. Now, Russia's Federal Security Services has published a video confession from the suspect, although it is not clear under what conditions he was admitting to the crimes. The FSB said the Uzbek suspect arrived in Moscow and received specific instructions, including an improvised explosive device used to carry out the assassination under Ukraine's instructions. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign ministry said that it will raise the assassination at the United Nations Security Council meeting on Friday. Now, Kirillov is the most senior Russian military official known to be killed since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In Mumbai, an Indian Navy speedboat crashed into a passenger ferry, causing it to capsize on Wednesday, killing at least 13 people. According to the Times of India, the ferry had some 110 people on board, 20 of which were children, and the Navy boat had 6 on board. A combined rescue effort by the Indian Coast Guard, Navy and the Marine Police has rescued 101 passengers. Maharashtra State Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis said that the passenger boat named Neel Kamal was heading to Elephanta Island from Mumbai's Gateway of India when the crash took place. Now, the Indian Navy stated that its craft lost control due to an engine malfunction while undertaking engine trials in Mumbai harbour. 2 Chinese astronauts from the Shenzhou 19 spaceflight completed a 9-hour and 6-minute spacewalk on Tuesday, setting a new record for the world's longest spacewalk. Now, according to China's manned space agency, Kai Zhuzhe and Song Lingdong, working from the Tiangong space station, completed their mission's first extravehicular activity, better known as a spacewalk, at 9:57 p.m. Beijing time on Tuesday. The 9-hour, 6-minute spacewalk broke the previous record of 8 hours and 56 minutes set in 2001 by American astronauts James Voss and Susan Helms. The Shenzhou 19 mission, which included China's first female space engineer, will continue with a series of scientific and technical experiments in its 6-month mission aboard the Tiangong space station. The world's oldest known complete tablet, inscribed with the 10 Commandments, was sold for $5.04 million at an auction in New York City on Wednesday. The approximately 1,500-year-old marble tablet, dating back to the late Roman Byzantine era, weighs about 52 kilograms and is some 61 centimeters in height. Now, it fetched well over its original estimate of $1 to $2 million. The still visible text of the 10 Commandments is written in Paleo-Hebrew script. According to the auction house Sotheby's, the tablet was excavated in 1913 during railway construction in southern Israel.
The coldest air of the season has settled onto many regions with sub-zero wind chills. Even Busan had a sub-zero morning temperatures. A cold wave advisory remains in place for much of the northern parts of South Korea. Paju saw ratings dropping down to below minus 15 degrees. But after a frigid start, temperatures return to norms along with plenty of winter sunshine. Tomorrow morning should be much more comfortable than today, so it's going to be more bearable today. Afternoon highs will go up 1 to 5 degrees higher than yesterday in most parts, topping out at 5 degrees Celsius in the capital and Chuncheon, Daegu at 8 degrees, Busan at 10 degrees Celsius. Sunny skies are expected nationwide. Meanwhile, East Coast regions and parts of Seoul are still under a dry weather advisory. We are expecting winter precipitation in most parts of Korea on Saturday, which is winter solstice. Then another severe cold snap will hit the nation on Sunday and into early next week. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for this morning. We will be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
The single letter that has captivated the world, K. We answered that question with a K-culture journalist on The Culture Wave. What's the next K on your radar? Get ready to ride the wave of K-culture's latest trends.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We're News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Thursday, December 19th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and this is News Generation. Today, we're joined by Kwon Ji-yeon.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. And Gi Kim.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So we're going to begin with our keyword news. Today's keyword is blog. Blogs have made a big comeback here in Korea this year. According to a new report from South Korea's largest web portal, Naver, over 2.14 million blogs were created between last November and this October. Now, this is a big jump compared to the 1.26 million new blogs created during the same period the year before. And millennials and Gen Z are believed to be a major factor behind this surge, as they now make up more than 60% of Naver blog users. This is very interesting because blogs were a huge deal back in the early 2000s, but as social media platforms took over, many faded away. So I want to ask our panelists, do you blog, and are you actually feeling that blogs are making a big comeback here in the country?
Well, not now, but I used to do blogs, not for myself, but for the company that I was working for at the time. But I used to visit my colleagues' blogs or the blogs that I'm interested in, for example, like cars or music or the cooking that I'm interested in. And nowadays, social media is way too open to everybody.
Right.
So many of them are commercial related, and we can't really differentiate what's real and then what's been paid to write or post. We can no longer trust so-called influencers anymore, and frankly speaking, there are too many ads, whereas blogs are more contents-oriented. And I recently hosted a press conference, and it was about the good old social media called SeaWorld.
Oh, SeaWorld.
It's returning, finally.
Yay!
And many reporters there asked the CEO if the platform would survive in this fierce competition. And the CEO specifically said that fact that many are returning to the blogs, and the retro and selective connection with people were keywords, and I guess blogs are a good set of example.
Right, so blogs and the SeaWorld platform that Kim mentioned, they are both were very big during the early 2000s, so they seem to be making or regaining popularity here in the country. Then Ju-yeon, do you blog, and what do you think about blogs resurging popularity?
Yes, I have certainly had experience blogging back in the days, though I don't actively maintain one these days. During my blogging days, I loved sharing behind the behind-the-scenes moments from my career and connecting with readers on a personal level, even though I did not have that much readers. And blogs are remaining popularity, as you mentioned, and I believe because they allow for personal, in-depth storytelling, something quick social media posts often
like
lack.
a diary, right?
That's correct, like their diaries, that is. And trends like photo dumps and hobbies show people value their creative self-expression in sort of that way. So they are a classic and modern way to connect, especially for the younger generations. And who says long-form content is dead? Blogs are proof it's thriving back.
Right. So do you have plans to restart your blog sometime?
No, in fact, no.
All right, that was our keyword news for this Thursday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Today we're going to focus on the latest cultural trends among young Koreans. Take a look at the screen to find out more.
When you hear the word history, what comes to mind? For some, it might have been your favorite subject in school or an area that you are passionate about. For others, it might bring back memories of cramming for exams, trying to memorize endless dates and events. Surprisingly, it seems that more young people in Korea are showing a growing interest in studying history.
Right, so as mentioned in the VCR, today we're going to talk about young people's growing interest towards studying history. So starting off, are there any examples that really show how much young people, our generation, is being fascinated by history?
Yes, there are so many examples. One clear example is a growing popularity of exhibitions and creative works based on historical figures. For example, there is the National Museum of Korean Contemporary History. They have reported a steady stream of visitors from the 20s and 30s, the 2030 generation, to its special exhibition. This marks the 115th anniversary of An Jung-geun's Harbin assassination. In fact, the museum stated it's the most visited exhibition by young people since its opening in 2012.
Wow.
So this reflects how history is being rediscovered in many different ways that feel relevant and engaging, especially for the MZ generation. Through recent events, the younger generation are saying that history repeats itself, that it feels like something out of a movie.
Right, because we are experiencing a time of great political turmoil here in South Korea, and An Jung-geun also fought for his home country, for his country during the Japanese colonization period, which I think makes him very relatable to the younger generation here. And as Juyeon mentioned, Korean freedom fighter An Jung-geun has been back in the spotlight recently with an exhibition that you mentioned recently starting. It's on at that museum until next March, so please check it out if you have the chance. And there's also a new movie about him set to hit the domestic theater soon on December 24th. And An Jung-geun is undoubtedly one of the most significant figures in Korean history. But for our international viewers who may not be familiar with him, could you please explain to us more about An Jung-geun?
Of course, of course. Well, An Jung-geun, he is one of the Korea's most iconic figures in the anti-Japanese resistance. He is famously, he assassinated, that is, Ito Hurubumi, that is, the key figure behind Korea's colonization in Harbin in 1909. He's also remembered for leaving a handprint in his own blood alongside a message expressing his hope for peace in East Asia. He cut off the tip of his left ring finger and wrote Korean independence, 대한 독립, in his blood. This symbolizes his strong dedication to the anti-Japanese movement. While the young generation have learned about him from history books, seeing his letters, pictures and telegrams firsthand has allowed them to connect with his struggles as a young man. So at the time of his execution, An was just 31 years old.
Right.
So a fact that resonates deeply with young people today, inspiring reflection on how they too can live with purpose like An Jung-geun.
Right. So the age that he was, it's really close to the age that we are right now. And we're seeing exhibitions and musicals and movies on it, which makes An Jung-geun really close to the younger generation especially. And besides An Jung-geun, another event that seems to have deepened our generation's curiosity about Korean history is President Yoon Suk-yeol's recent short-lived declaration of martial law 2 weeks ago. And that's because many people said they felt like they had traveled back in time to the 1970s and 80s when martial law was imposed, right, Ki?
Exactly. Everyone has probably heard about the news that the President of the Republic of Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, declaring martial law on the night of December 3rd, 2024. Of course, the National Assembly quickly assembled and opened up an emergency meeting to conduct and decided to overturn the martial law, which became a huge controversial issue, leading to the impeachment motion of the current president, which eventually was passed by the National Assembly as some of the ruling party members supported it. And now the ball is in the Constitutional Court. Now, we have to be really, really careful on this matter. Special investigation teams and many other law experts are saying that President Yoon is illegally engaged in an insurrection, abuse of power and all. And the President Yoon is claiming that he was only practicing his right authority as the president. Nothing was unconstitutional, blaming opposition Democratic Party that's created this inevitable situation. The similarity is you saw heavily armed and well-trained soldiers and special forces that we're not sure if they had a live ammunition at the time. We're still investigating. And then they seized the National Assembly building, broke the window to get in, and blocked the people from getting in and out of the National Assembly building. Yes, we saw the soldiers, tanks, armored vehicles, helicopters landing on the middle of the capital, Seoul, like the ones you would see from the movie that actually took place in the 70s and 80s. Then the difference is everything was live broadcasted, not by the broadcasters, but by citizens, by their smartphones. And we've covered this on News Generation. We saw citizens peacefully protesting in non-violent way, just like yesterday's, but in different styles with cheering sticks and flags.
And what you just saw on the screen was the footage of the night of December 3rd. Now, although this martial law attempt on December 3rd failed, it was short-lived. Its aftermath, which still continues today, has led to a surge in popularity for movies, dramas, and books that focus on Korea's martial law imposition back in the 1970s and 80s, right?
Right. So many of the MZers and younger generations are now taking a closer look at the films or dramas that's based on a history, or even TV shows is about a history about the past. 서울의 봄, or The Day, starring 정우성 and Hwang Jung-min that you're seeing right now, jumped the #1 OTT movie to watch, which portrayed a former president, Chun Doo-han, who was deeply related to coup and martial law back in late 1970s. The movie, which was released last year, has been tremendously loved by a lot of viewers. And Jang Tae-wan, the Capital Defense Command, played by Jung Woo-sung, got so much attention that his past interview has so many views on YouTube. Unfortunately, that was not the case this time, as the defense command of the capital was arrested. Also, 택시 운전사, or a taxi driver, a film based on May 18th movement, 1980, 화려한 휴가, 5월의 청춘, or The Youth of May, the drama. All these are getting huge popularity, and younger generations are now understanding how precious it is that we live in this peaceful country and that our fathers and mothers fought for and to earn that peace.
Right, and I want to especially mention that the movie 12/12 The Day is gaining huge spotlight once again. It was the second movie to surpass 10 million ticket sales in the domestic theaters last year, and as Ki mentioned, it's now topping the streamer chart once again that it's being streamed on. Now, on a more broader scale, we're also seeing long-running TV programs dedicated to exploring Korean and world history besides specific content on specific historical figures and events that we just talked about. And the fact that these programs continue to attract strong viewership shows there is a real demand for history. However, not too long ago, young people were often criticized for being indifferent or uninformed when it came to history when compared to the previous generation. And there were even cases where celebrities in their 20s and 30s made headlines for not knowing some of the most basic historical facts or figures. But now it seems more young people are becoming curious and engaged in learning history. So what do you think has driven this change?
I reckon the growing interest in history among the MZ's generation reflects their desire to find guidance and inspiration at the same time. They are turning to historical figures like An Jung-gun to learn about courage, resilience, and how to overcome these kind of challenges, much like the struggles we face today.
Right.
And experiencing things like martial law, which they had only seen in films and books back in the days, they are turning to historical figures for answers on how to respond and move forward. And this shift may also be influenced by the accessibility of history through engaging platforms like films, as Keon mentioned, and TV shows, and also social media. These platforms make history feel more relatable and relevant, sparking curiosity in ways that traditional methods couldn't do before. So it's clear that young people are looking at the past for valuable lessons to help them navigate today's uncertainty. So it turns out the past has more answers than ChatGPT or Google.
Right, so it is kind of part of their journey to find answers at this time of turmoil and uncertainty. Now, what do you think, Key?
Well, the AMSeers for the first time witnessed the life-threatening experience, something that they only saw from the TV or on YouTube or any sort of media.
Right.
They realized lots of things that they enjoy right now are privileges and not just something that's given. If you actually take a look at Korea's contemporary history, it's been complex. You know, there's so many great people who fought for democracy, and AMSeers want to find out the original roots. They want to learn how the democracy has been formed, how they should live, lead a life. And there's so many classes or YouTube videos out there that tell you the story, the history like a fairy tale. You know, there are many interesting classes, but you have to be careful because everything that they tell you are not necessarily true. So you always have to check the fact.
All right. So until now, we focused on the growing interest among our generation towards history in Korea. But expanding our discussion, we also asked our viewers to introduce historical figures from their countries who are gaining attention, especially from the younger generation. Let's take a look at some of their responses. Our first answer for today, we JCK026 for us in the Netherlands. Anne Frank is a popular historical figure among international and domestic audiences since her diary shares first-hand experiences of a young girl living through the horrors of World War II and persecution on the grounds of ethnicity. YouTube is okay, says Abraham Lincoln, an icon of American history and political culture. And the King's Kid F4R, Dedan Kimathi, is a popular figure from Kenyan history. He was a heroic freedom fighter who inspired the independence movement against British occupation in the 50s and an inspiring symbol of courage against an exploitative post-colonial government. Right, so we've taken a look at our viewers' comments. Now, for more on what's driving this passion for history among our generation, we're going to invite a history expert to our talks. We'll be back after the break.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
So joining us today is John P. DeMoya, Professor of Korean History at Seoul National University. Hello, Professor.
Hello, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Professor, we want to ask you, are you actually noticing that young people are becoming more engaged with history? And if so, which parts or eras do you think interest them the most?
Yes, I think very much so. Obviously, as you have, I was listening earlier, have just said, due to current events, but even more so because of where we are in the world, Northeast Asia. Lots of people and students and younger people are interested in Korea-Chinese history, so they get interested in Chosun because of Chosun-Qing relations, and even more so, obviously, because of the long-standing historical relationship with Japan. Lots and lots of people are interested in all kinds of aspects of late Chosun and then colonial period history.
Now, Professor, what do you think has triggered the younger generation's curiosity about history?
Yeah, I think a lot of different things, but to try to attribute it to a couple main factors. One, I want to be careful here, but like the rising of all of the East Asian economies, along with some of the accompanying nationalism, means that younger Koreans who are aware of their own, relatively nice lives, but become aware again of Japan and especially China's economic rise, get very interested. I mean, I don't want to say that it's just that we're in Northeast Asia and it's geographical proximate, but you can't help but noticing these things, and we're not that far from Beijing, we're not that far from Tokyo, so you develop a certain kind of awareness. I think the other thing is kind of funny, but I think, again, having listened to the earlier part of your program, it's absolutely relevant, and that's popular culture. The sheer number of movies, films, K-dramas that have historical content where young people get exposed to it, get curious about, okay, is that really true? What's the accuracy of this? As you pointed out, the Harbin film, which I have to admit, I myself will probably go see in the next week or so. These things make history very much alive and kind of present. And again, people get interested in what's true about this. How can I investigate a little bit?
Okay, Professor. Unfortunately, my job title is no longer a student, but people like me, or for those who want to explore and study history more deeply, do you have any suggestion or any tips?
Yeah, a couple things on a simple level. One of them might seem counterintuitive, but talk to your family. Talk to your parents and talk to your grandparents. You might not realize, particularly if you're younger, that these people, depending on how old they are, have lived through the events of the 1980s, more even going back further, the Korean War and perhaps the colonial period. There are insights there and things that you might not realize are right at your fingertips. I guess even then, more practically, beyond getting, as you said, to formal historical study, even things like basically developing a particular interest, whether you're collecting something you might not think you're doing historical work, but you are kind of. I mean, it's a joke among historians, and it's bad for me, but the joke is it's not trash, it's history. To give you even like one quick example, when COVID happened in Korea, I was probably one of the few weird people taking pictures of the public health posters around Seoul because I knew that those would disappear rapidly, and those are of immense historical interest to people who study things like that. So yeah, talk to the people around you, develop an interest in the world around you, and you would be surprised at how much history is right there and accessible to you.
Definitely. All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we'd like to end off today's episode with a question that might sound simple and obvious, but is often overlooked. Why is it so important for us to learn and understand history? Because although history is a mandatory subject in many schools, we often forget its deeper value, blindly memorizing facts just to pass exams or get good grades. So please tell us the importance about learning history.
It is very important.
It is.
Studying history helps us understand the mistakes and successes of the past. And this offers valuable lessons for the present and future. As the saying goes, a nation that forgets its history has no future.
Right.
So ultimately, history guides us in building a more thoughtful and informed society. And in fact, next year, my son will start his primary school. And the one thing I emphasize above all is learning Korean history. So that's why I signed him up to a Korean history program at many museums here in Seoul. It's like teaching him to read a map. Without history, he would be lost.
I think history definitely acts as a good compass for the future generation. What do you think, Keith?
Well, when I was a student long time ago, I hated history class. I just took it just to, pass and get good grades because I had to memorize so much, right? And one of the things I hated the most was try to figure out the events and have them in order, in chronological order. But what I recall now, why didn't I pay attention back then? And now I love its history. It's a way to find your original roots. And my late father used to say that the history is like a mirror and it repeats itself. And you learn from those mistakes that you committed from the past, like Jian said.
Right.
I mean, who would expect the martial law declaration in year 2024?
Right.
It exactly repeated again after 30, 40 years. And so you just got to learn from the past and try to make a better future out of it.
Definitely. All right, that's all from NewsGen today, but we'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Kwon Ji-young.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Ki Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colours? Grab an apron. It's the best defence against oil splatter and smoke.